As the last lights of the sun disappeared over Huanglian Sun mountain range, the mountain villages shined brightly with electric lights. There was no moon that night, but the electric lights brightened every home and every road. Since electricity reached the village, the roads were no longer an obstacle, bringing hope and joy to all the rural villages.
Có điện là cái giấc mơ ngàn đời của nhân dân chúng ta, mà đấy cũng là một trong những cái mục tiêu mà chúng ta đã phấn đấu trong nhiều năm để giành lại cái độc lập tự do cho đất nước. Thì sau khi mà giải phóng đất nước năm 1975 thì Đảng ta cũng đã có chủ trương về cái việc là phát triển hệ thống lưới điện để bảo đảm cái việc cung cấp điện cho cái nhu cầu cơ bản của người dân.
Rural electrification is a tough task that requires a lot of effort. This task can only be performed by the power of the whole population. It works due to the attention of the party and the state, the close and effective coordination of the business community, and the unity of the whole people. Now, those footsteps are still silently going over the mountains, through the forests. The shirts of electrical executives, workers, and engineers are damp with sweat. In parallel to complete this task is the assistance from international organizations. Through the process of implementing the rural electrification program from the past to the present, we have been achieving groundbreaking results, and this is the pride of all those who were and are working together. Bringing electricity to rural areas, our stretch of road. Since the day of liberation and reunification, Vietnam has been undergoing a powerful change. The economy has grown quickly, showing a positive shift in economic structure. Cultural and social fields have gained important achievements, especially in eliminating hunger and an effective poverty reduction movement. Physical and mental quality of life has visibly risen. The position of Vietnam in the international market has risen, making it an important premise to hasten the industrialization, modernization, and thus the improvement of people's quality of life. Remarkable distributions in the socio-economic development of our country over the years have shown their effectiveness in the rural electrification program. This program has boosted the transfer of rural economic structures, facilitating the modernization of rural agricultural techniques. The investments to improve and develop the rural electrical grid has made a distinct change in the lives of millions of Vietnamese rural citizens. The quality of life in rural areas has gained results in the economic, political, and cultural fields. So far, the rural electrification program has been growing. Vietnam is considered as one of the countries which have carried out this infrastructure development effectively. In the years following 1975, Vietnam entered a period of construction and recovery. The country's economy faced innumerable difficulties, with the rate of household access to electricity at only 2.5%. At that time, the electrical power system was simply the combination of separate and underdeveloped networks, only being able to provide electricity for urban areas and main industries. Electricity in rural areas gave priority to irrigational works and focused on the agricultural sector only. After 10 years, we made efforts to construct and repair thermal power stations, but the capacity was still low. The rate of households with electricity rose to just 9.3%. Since the renovation policy in 1986, the economy has made active changes. Along with the upgrading of Pha Lai, Uông Bi, and Ninh Binh thermal power plants, was the construction of two large hydroelectric plants, Hoa Binh and Thác Ba. Successfully built, the 500 kilovolt north-south power transmission line totaling 1,497 kilometers in length helped to transmit excess power from the north to the central and south. The projects contributed significantly to the development of the country economy at the time. The party and the state realized that it was necessary to invest comprehensively in constructing basic infrastructure in accordance with plans to help the economy and society develop stably and sustainably. To perform this task, the requirement of a fully worked-out grid system was a top priority. Developing more access to electricity in rural areas was a need that would be high on the list of priorities to modernize agriculture, aquaculture, irrigation, and serve the daily needs for households. From the period of 1986 to 1993, the proportion of households connected to electricity rose from 10 to 14%. Although there was no big jump in the increase of proportion of households connected to electricity at that time, the policy decisions were made and the steps taken accordingly had positive impacts on rural electrification. Notably, the income of people in rural areas increased as a result of innovation. The initial successes created a foundation for us to continuously achieve significant improvements in the work of rural electrification in the next phase. The completion of the last machinery systems of Hua Bing hydropower plant and the other large hydroelectric plants helped to meet the rising demands of electricity in rural areas. The 500 kilovolt power transmission line formed the lifeline of the power transfer to the central and southern regions. Vietnam showed strong determination and took methodical steps to develop rural electrification. Another milestone during this period was the establishment of the Vietnam Electricity, EVN, in 1995. In the year 1996, the electrification target was set clearly by the state. Consequently, the state and the World Bank joined together to prepare for the first project of the energy industry in Vietnam. After a period of rapid growth in the work of rural electrification, the rate of households with electrical access rose from 14 to 61%. However, the electrical transmission process consumed nearly 50% of electricity production. Therefore, the establishment of policies to operate rural power grid based on technical standards became the new focus. From 1998 to 2004, the rate of households with electrical access increased from 61 to 87%. This figure demonstrated that the process of rural electrification in Vietnam was achieving satisfactory results. The state approved the strategies planned to implement rural electrification management, established the legal frameworks in this field, and attracted the participation of international partners in the implementation of rural electrification business. In addition to important activities such as Decision 22/1999/QD-TTG by the Prime Minister of Vietnam, approved the Rural Electricity Scheme, which set up institutions and finances for power systems during this period. Based on those foundations, the electrical sector established ceiling prices for rural customers, which is a step towards protecting the people by limiting prices of electricity in rural areas. During this period, we had ODA funds from the World Bank for a rural energy project with a credit of $150 million. A series of technical standards for Vietnam's rural electrification network was launched by the electrical sector and strictly enforced in the construction and management processes. The project was powerfully developed in many regions across the country, from the countryside to the cities, from the mountains to the remote islands. Low voltage power stations were installed. Pole and wire systems were upgraded and extended throughout the countryside and villages. Footsteps of the electrical staffs, workers, and engineers tirelessly moved day and night to bring electricity to the countryside and remote villages. Electricity reaching rural areas has brought changes in farming habits and skills, intensive cultivation, raises of productivity, and plant restructuration. The huge coffee plantations were there among the vast green Chuang Sun Mountain. The white sandy plains turned into lush vegetable fields, salt marsh areas became the aquaculture lakes, modern and large-scale cattle breeding farms were established.
Ngày xưa là đây là những cái đồng cát là sa mạc, có như rất nóng. Về mùa hè là có những người mà không đi dẹp là ở đi trên đất là có như bỏng cả chân. Nên là sau khi có cái điện đi về đến đây vì có cái chủ trương của tỉnh về vấn đề là cái trồng rau củ quả trên cái đất cát bạc màu vùng ven biển này, thì gia đình chúng tôi là rất quyết tâm là đi tìm hiểu và đầu tư về để làm cái rau củ quả trên cát này.
Bringing electricity to rural areas has also had important impacts on promoting the creation of a new lifestyle in rural areas. Many localities have used electricity to enlighten the town centers, clinics, and schools. These are the first and the most important factors to build up a new rural model. Electricity also contributed to the guidelines and policies of the party and state, the knowledge and production fields, and the improvement of intellectual standards of the people.
Ngày xưa khi chưa có điện, tối đến chẳng biết làm gì, chỉ biết ngồi uống rượu. Bây giờ nhà nào cũng sáng đèn. Nhà mình còn mua cả vô tuyến và nồi cơm điện nữa.
Vietnam Electricity, EVN, launched a pilot program to operate the low voltage grid and received medium voltage grid, which was invested and constructed by other organizations. Members of the local community, on behalf of the electricity companies, performed the operation and maintenance of the low voltage grid, made simple repairs, and ensured for the collection of electricity payments. This helped enhance responsibility in local communities, ensured on-time payment, reduced system losses, and significantly reduced electrical companies' cost of operating and managing the power grids.
Khoảng năm 1998 đến nay, ở giai đoạn này thì vừa phát triển theo cả chiều rộng lẫn phát triển theo chiều sâu, cũng với phương châm nhà nước và nhân dân cùng làm, trung ương và địa phương cùng làm, nhưng có một sự thay đổi một chút. Ngành điện thì ngoài việc giải quyết lo liệu về nguồn điện rồi phát triển cái hệ thống lưới điện thì bắt đầu tiếp nhận cái lưới điện trung áp nông thôn để hoàn thiện cái lưới điện trung áp nông thôn và bắt đầu tập trung để cấp điện cho những cái khu vực vùng sâu, vùng xa, những cái khu vực đặc biệt khó khăn mà địa phương không thể lo liệu được.
To improve the ability of managing the low voltage network locally, the World Bank offered many courses on training and management. This had a part in enhancing better management for local units. This was also a lesson learned, which the World Bank applied in many other countries in the field of developing electrical networks in rural and remote areas. Entering the period of 2005 to 2008, the government chose to focus on quality and management. Along with the continuous expansion of electrical connectivity, there was shift in the focus from expansion to restoration and renovation of the low voltage grid. The state gave direct support to the expansion of the grid connection, especially for ethnic minorities, rural and remote areas. The state set goals to not only focus on increasing the rate of households connected, but also to ensure the efficiency and power quality. The Rural Energy Project Number 2, RE2, was born from the roots of those goals. This project belonged to the cooperation program on the field of rural energy between the government of Vietnam and the World Bank. During this period, we had established 5,600 local decontamination units, LDUs. These brought about major changes in the organization, management, and operation of the rural electrical grid. People would directly buy electricity at the prices fixed by the state instead of buying through intermediary organizations as before. Annual expenses of rural households were reduced, power quality was increased, meeting the demand for electricity to serve daily activities, production, and farming businesses.
Và có cái nguồn điện đưa vào bên trong cái khu vực này đó thì cũng đã tạo điều kiện để cho cái việc phát triển nông nghiệp công nghệ cao. Các cái đồn điền, các cái khu vực vườn rẫy của bà con nông dân cũng điều kiện là để phát triển kinh tế tăng thêm. Về mặt là tinh thần thì ánh sáng và cái điện đến với các bản làng thì cũng tạo điều kiện để bà con tiếp cận được cái văn hóa, tiếp cận được những cái việc là những cái thông tin cũng như là những cái điều kiện là để truyền thông giúp cho mình có thể hiểu được hơn, nắm hơn những cái tình hình, thực hiện cái nhiệm vụ của tỉnh rồi là những cái chủ trương chính sách của nhà nước.
At LDUs, product management abilities were also improved. The project management boards at LDUs had issued democratic, open, working regulations, and the projects quickly saw achievements. The rural power system was widely developed, enhancing safety, reducing power losses, and improving power quality in rural and remote areas. Use of electrical appliances liberated human laborers, especially women in the family. It allowed them to have time to raise awareness, to communicate and expand social interactions, contributing to the social goals of reducing poverty, reducing birth rate, etc.
Hồi xưa là người dân tộc khi mà chưa có điện á, nhiều lúc nấu cơm mà ông chồng không kịp đi làm á, hai vợ chồng cứ lục đục nhau vì cái nồi cơm đó thôi mà cũng đánh nhau luôn á. Nó khổ vậy. Mà nó có điện á thì đương nhiên nó tiện lợi hơn. Bây giờ mình chỉ cắm thế là coi như là cơm tự chín và cơm chín nó đều lắm, chứ nó không có giống như là mình nấu bằng tay là có khi nó cháy, nó khê, nó sống vậy á.
From 2009 to 2012, rural electrification entered the phase of reinforcement and consolidation for development. On one hand, it focused on ensuring the sustainability of rural electricity supplemented businesses. On the other hand, it sped up the most appropriate strategies for expanding access for people without electricity and ensured affordability. The most notable milestone of this period was Decision 21/2009/QD-TTG by the Prime Minister, which fixed a uniform tariff for all customers, along with the incline block tariff (IBT) and a new incline block for the residential sector. This decision also allowed electrical companies to change into electrical power corporations and to take over LDUs. The sustainability was heightened thanks to regulations of distribution network approved in 2010, which stipulated the rights and obligations of power companies towards customers. In detail, it assigned the responsibilities of service quality and consumer protection. Until 2010, it was estimated that 99% of communes and 96% of households had been connected to the electricity grid. The state continued to restore and improve the electricity grid in 3,000 communes, finding that the most suitable ways to achieve the goals of electrifying all households nationally, guaranteeing the sustainability of operating the rural power grid and continuously ensuring affordability. Rows of poles have stretched out to every village, reached out to the islands, and widely opened their huge arms through the vast emptiness to touch rural and remote areas. Even the poor can access electricity for the lighting and daily lives. Today, life in the village has changed in astonishing ways. A bright future can be reflected in the eyes and songs of children. As a long-term goal expected to be achieved by 2020, Vietnam has a target of most rural households having access to electricity from the national grid, improving the power grid for better service. Along the way, there have been and will be many problems, difficulties, and challenges that need to be addressed. According to calculations made by the General Department of Energy, Ministry of Industry and Trade, in the coming years, we need to recover and renovate the low-voltage power grid in about 3,000 communes nationwide to reduce power losses, as well as to upgrade the medium-voltage power grid to meet rising demands. According to preliminary estimates by EVN, to renovate the existing low-voltage grid to reach the current standard of Vietnam will cost between $2 and $3 billion. To ensure the sustainability of operations of rural electrical networks, we need to enhance management abilities of the power companies and provide the skills necessary to operate the rural electrical grid efficiently and sustainably.
Từ nay đến năm 2020, Điện Nông thôn Việt Nam cần khoảng gần 3 tỷ đô la. Đây là một cái lượng vốn cũng khá lớn đối với Tập đoàn Điện lực Việt Nam. Cho nên chúng tôi cũng rất hy vọng và mong rằng các tổ chức tài chính quốc tế tiếp tục có những cái chương trình cho vay các cái nguồn vốn ODA, và đặc biệt là Ngân hàng Thế giới cũng tiếp tục có cái chương trình giúp cho một cái chương trình điện khí hóa nông thôn Việt Nam thực hiện cái chương trình nông thôn mới mà chính phủ đang chỉ đạo điều hành để nâng cao được chất lượng, đảm bảo được độ tin cậy và giúp cho cái việc chuyển dịch, phát triển cơ cấu kinh tế cũng như sản xuất nông nghiệp ở các cái vùng nông thôn Việt Nam.
The National Energy Development Strategy, issued in December 2007, set the goal of expanding electrical access in the rural and mountainous areas in the islands of the country, where electricity has had limited reach. Specifically, all rural households should have access to electricity by 2020. Finding out the most appropriate way to electrify the remaining households is a very big challenge, since most of the poor, remote, and mountainous areas have very low power consumption outputs. Ensuring that the poor can also pay for electricity through IBT regulations is also a top priority of power companies and their scopes of management.
Vai trò của điện khí hóa nông thôn là cực kỳ quan trọng để vừa là đưa cái công nghiệp địa phương vào trong nông nghiệp, để thúc đẩy phát triển nông nghiệp nông thôn nông dân theo nghị quyết của Trung ương, để vừa sớm hiện đại hóa trong nông nghiệp nông thôn nông dân, và đặc biệt là chế biến sâu các loại sản phẩm từ nông nghiệp, nông sản, chế biến nông sản, hải sản, thủy sản, súc sản thì nhất thiết phải có điện. Không có điện không thể thực hiện được cái sự nghiệp làm cho nông thôn ngày càng được đổi mới và nhất là tăng về chất lượng, và nhất là chỉ bên sâu. Cho nên là chúng tôi thấy cái sự cần thiết, cấp bách mà rất là quan trọng của vai trò điện khí hóa.
Amid the joy of rural areas shining with electricity, there are still areas at remote, distant island places where people live without electricity. The farmers of rural areas in Vietnam are waiting, yearning each day, each hour, for power to come and light up a new life. The road to complete the mission of a rural electrification in 2020 will experience more and more challenges and difficulties. However, with the combined efforts between the government, enterprises, and people, as well as with the mobilization and combination of many resources, as well as international partnerships, it is certain that we will reach the finish line.
Chương trình Điện Nông thôn Việt Nam chỉ có thể thắng lợi được khi mà đó là cái nhiệm vụ của tất cả các cấp và tất cả mọi người, từ người sử dụng điện cho đến người cung cấp điện đều cùng phải tham gia. Đối với chương trình điện khí hóa nông thôn của Việt Nam thì Ngân hàng Thế giới đánh giá rằng là một trong những chương trình có thể nói là thành công nhất trên thế giới. Từ năm 1976 sau khi giải phóng miền Nam thì cái tỷ lệ mà hộ dân có điện ở Việt Nam là độ khoảng 3%. Thế mà cho đến bây giờ thì đến năm nay này thì chúng ta có hơn 97% số hộ dân toàn quốc có điện. Thì đó là một cái nỗ lực rất lớn lao và một cái thành công rất lớn của chính phủ Việt Nam.
In conjunction with the work of the Rural Electrification Program in Vietnam, the next 15 years will have the assistance of many international organizations, especially the World Bank.
Sự tham gia của các cái tổ chức quốc tế như là Ngân hàng Thế giới, Ngân hàng Phát triển châu Á, rồi là các cái tổ chức tín dụng song phương khác, như là cái quỹ của Thụy Điển, của Canada, của Na Uy và của Đức, hoặc là các cái ngân hàng như là KfW và JICA của Nhật Bản. Có thể nói là cái vai trò của họ đóng góp vào những cái dự án cho điện khí hóa nông thôn nói riêng và cho ngành điện nói chung là hết sức to lớn. Không những chỉ là về đóng góp về nguồn vốn trong cái lúc chúng ta khó khăn, mà còn đóng góp rất nhiều về các cái cơ chế chính sách, tham gia với chính phủ trong quá trình xây dựng các cái cơ chế chính sách trong quá trình phát triển ngành điện, cũng như là tái cơ cấu ngành điện trong quá trình điện khí hóa khu vực nông thôn.
The World Bank has given support for Vietnam economic development programs and participated in the electricity sector since 1995. In preparation for the power sector restoration projects and followed by power sector development projects in 1996, when access to electricity in rural areas was at only 50%, the World Bank has supported the realization of the Vietnamese objectives, including the expansion of access to electricity for half of the remaining rural households in Vietnam through a number of investment projects, technical assistance, and policy dialogues.
Trong 15 năm vừa qua, thì Ngân hàng Thế giới là một cái tổ chức tài chính quốc tế là hỗ trợ cho Việt Nam là lớn nhất cho cái sự nghiệp điện khí hóa nông thôn Việt Nam. Và ngoài ra còn Ngân hàng Phát triển châu Á và các cái nhà tài trợ khác thì có những cái chương trình nhỏ hơn, nhưng mà họ cũng rất là ra sức hỗ trợ ở Việt Nam trong cái công việc xóa đói giảm nghèo, và cụ thể là trong các cái chương trình điện khí hóa nông thôn.
Rural Energy Project 1, approved in May of 2000 in the amount of $150 million from ODA credit, is consistent with the state's priorities. It was fully dedicated for quick access to rural areas without electricity, and especially for increasing the number of basic connections. Rural Energy Project 2, approved in November of 2004 for $220 million of ODA credit. The project focused on restoring, upgrading, and expanding the medium voltage and low voltage networks to approximately 1,600 rural communes in 25 provinces and cities around the country. In 2008, Rural Combination Project was started with $150 million from ODA credit. This project was carried out in 5 years to improve the reliability and quality of medium voltage grids, bring electricity to local distribution units, and build up capacity for LDUs so that they could act as independent partners in the electricity sector. In May of 2009, an additional credit of $200 million in the form of additional financing for the Rural Energy Project 2 was approved by the Board of Directors of the World Bank. These additional funds were used to settle the financial shortfall because of inflations related to the initial activities of the project and to increase the size of the project of the restoration and renovation of the low voltage and medium voltage grids for more communes.
So we think it's a great idea that the government wants to achieve this. It's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy, but it is doable. And how you do it is what the government needs to look at in a very strategic and a deliberate way and find the most effective way of arriving at this important goal. I think we as the World Bank can bring experiences from other countries. Whether we bring financing or not, really at the end of the day, it's the government's choice, because there will be trade-offs. We can spend resources supporting the government to do this, or supporting the government to do other things that are needed. And at the end of the day, the government will have to make the trade-off and say, yes, this is where we want you to support us. But having seen so much progress made already, we're encouraged that the government wants to continue and reach the last segment of the population with the service.
We would like to repeat the words of Deputy Prime Minister Hoàng Trung Hải in regards to the cooperation between the government of Vietnam and the World Bank on the rural electrification project. It has been 15 years from the day when the government and the World Bank began working together. The electrification work of Vietnam has seen many great changes. From the early days of the cooperation when the power system had just been incorporated to the present time, when over 95% of households have access to electricity, is such a fascinating story. It is not only the story about policy and institution, finance, or electricity price, but it is also the story of the growth of Vietnam as a country and as a society built up from a unified power of electrification.
Đảo xa nơi anh đã có điện thắp sáng khắp nơi em ạ. Khi màn đêm buông xuống, hòn đảo bỗng lung linh như một thành phố nổi giữa biển khơi. Nhất định anh sẽ đón hai mẹ con em ra đảo để thấy nơi đây đẹp đến nhường nào. Em biết không, huyện đảo nơi đây đang thay đổi từng ngày. Giờ đây được tận mắt chứng kiến niềm vui của người già trẻ nhỏ quây quần bên chiếc tivi, anh càng thấu hiểu nguồn điện lưới đang mang đến cuộc sống ấm no về nơi này. Và anh bỗng nhận ra rằng đảo xa và đất liền đã ngày càng gần thêm. Anh và các bạn đồng nghiệp cảm thấy hạnh phúc và vô cùng vinh dự vì đã đóng góp một phần công sức nhỏ bé của mình cho cuộc sống nơi tiền tiêu Tổ quốc.
Such holy prides seem to add strength to help the officers, workers, and engineers of the electricity sector step towards more firmly. Difficulties are folding in front of the eye, but we believe that this rural electrification work gained the strength of the whole people and of the accompanying of international friends in it. We will definitely come to the finish of prosperity and happiness.
Điện đã về bản làng ơi, điện đã về với bản làng xa xôi. Đêm nay không trăng không